The only way I can describe opening the 40th anniversary Blu-ray special edition of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory was like being a kid in a candy store, because I pull out the golden ticket and I actually had a tingling spine happening. It brings back memories of sitting around watching this movie that was on TV only once a year with the entire family. That doesn't happen anymore. And the memories that I have of loving this movie and being with my family, it has to be enjoyable for you as people that created the movie to sit back and reflect.
Well, number one, you must realize I made this movie for adults. I didn't make it for children. And maybe that's one reason why it's stayed around. It's filled with English poetry, it's filled with Shakespeare, it's filled with a very sharp adult wit. And that's why I think people still look at it today, even when they're grown up, and they still can find values in it that you wouldn't find in another children's movie.
Mel, there's a beautiful color pamphlet called Pure Imagination in this DVD. Yeah. And as I'm reading it, I was just thinking, you're actually sitting down and telling the stories of from the beginning to the end of this movie and after. How was it reflecting back as you're writing that?
Say that again?
The Pure Imagination booklet.
Yeah.
You going back and writing the stories and reliving. How was that? Was the information just flowing out of you, or did you have to be prodded a little bit here and there?
Yes. When you make a movie, and if you're the director, there are a lot of stories that never see the light of day. And I wanted people to understand what the story was behind the story. And it was a very enjoyable thing to do. I think my favorite story is the last line of the picture. And I was in Munich, that's where we shot it, and I had this young man, David Seltzer, come, sort of punch up the script. The script is Roald Dahl's, but we needed a little bit of punching up. And at the end, when I was shooting Gene Wilder in the last scene of the picture, I looked at the last line of the script, and it said, "Grandpa says yippee." And I said, oh my God, I can't end my picture with Grandpa saying yippee. Where's the young man that I brought over to Munich? Oh, he's back in Maine. I said, well, I've got to have the last line. Remember, in those days, there were no faxes, there were no computers. The only way you could talk was by phone to the United States. So we got him on the phone, and I said, David, I need the last line of the picture. He said, well, I'll think about it, I'll get back to you. I said, no. Gene Wilder's on the set, or everybody's ready to go, and I don't have the last line. He said, how long do I have? And I said, you have 5 minutes. I want you to come up with the last line of the picture. Now, for people who don't remember the last line, just think for a second, what would you do if you had 5 minutes to come up with the last line?
Besides panic?
Of the picture. And he walked away, and I looked at my watch. A minute and a half later, he came back, and he said, okay, here's the last line. He said, Mr. Wonka says to Charlie, you know what happens to someone that gets everything they want in life, Charlie? Charlie says, no, Mr. Wonka. He says, they live happily ever after. Now, how that young man, under that pressure, could come up with that line, which I certainly couldn't, I'm not a writer. I said, not too bad, David, you can go back to your cabin. But the next feature I did, One is a Lonely Number, I insisted he write it. And then right after that, on his own, he wrote The Omen, and he's going on. But he had it. And I love that in the business when young people, he was only 23, he had never written a picture before, come up and you know they have it. Whether it's an actor or cameraman or anything else. You just have it or you don't.
It's an iconic line. It's one of those great movie lines. Now, Rusty, this is your first movie.
Yes.
I want to know, on the first day of work, were you playing it cool, just kind of like, you didn't know what was going on, you didn't know what was involved in a movie?
I love show business, and this was going to be my first movie, and I wanted to soak up everything right from the day one. And we went to Munich, and there was a language barrier because there were only 5 English guys. So there was one guy from Malta, one guy from Turkey, one guy from Spain, Germany, and we didn't have no European community there, no EC. So everyone had their own nationalities. And the age difference, well, I was the youngest, I was 20s, and the eldest guy was about 75. So we had a problem when we had to learn the dances and everything else. I always remember one day, the first day I was sitting on the set with Howard Jeffrey. He came in and he showed us, he said, right boys, I'll show you the first routine. And he was dancing like Rudolf Nureyev, Mikhail Baryshnikov. And he was, do you want us to do this? He said, well, the guy was 78, he just walked out, he went to sick bay straight away. And the German guys, they all went. So it basically left to the four of us, the youngest guys, who were doing all the main dance work.
Now, Rusty,
Well, one thing.
what?
I had to have a main Oompa Loompa. And when I found out that Rusty had done Shakespeare, I said, you're the main Oompa Loompa. That's all I needed to know. He had done Shakespeare.
That
I knew
Shakespeare carried
he
a lot of weight,
understood. He would
Yes,
understand.
yes.
Now, Rusty, the movie comes out.
Yes.
Let's face it, not the greatest cartwheels in cartwheel history.
76 takes.
76 takes. Okay.
Well, going back to what I was saying just now, you've got the elderly guys, and we've had to lip sync all the words. We've recorded it, so and that's just the English guys. Had to get some American from the bases in, singers from the US bases in to bump up the singing. So we had to oompa loompa, and you can't get the German. So it ought to be like this. So us four, and then we had to have a couple of the elderly guys at the end of picking one up and go do like that. So I was doing all these cartwheels, and they couldn't get it right. The lifting up, and there was an oompa where there should be a loompa. I was doing the 76 takes. Alka-Seltzer was very good to me those days. I love him.
Well, we hear stories in interviews with the kids, and they talk about you, Mel, being a perfectionist. Rusty, is this the case?
Here's the case. This man here, and I'm going to say it in front of him, he created magic. He created a classic. The magic didn't appear straight away, but it just come over everybody like a lovely spell, a lovely happiness spell. This man did it, and one of the only few directors in the world ever that has done that. And I'm sitting next to him.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'll put the check in the post.
When we watch the scene, especially in the warehouse, when they're all the workers are opening Wonka bars, there are just literally thousands of Wonka bars. How is it that so very little props survived from this movie that are such the highest collectibles in the movie industry?
You know what? I regret that for the rest of my life. I should have taken everything home because it really would be worth a lot of money today. But at the time, you make a movie, you don't have a real idea what's going to happen to it. And it was so much stuff that we were in Munich. We didn't shoot this in the United States. And I just couldn't find a way to bring it all back. And I remember I had about 4 of those chocolate Wonka bars, and I gave one to Steven Spielberg for a DGA. There was some getting money for the DGA, and it sold for $1,000. I couldn't believe it. They're just a piece of wood.
In those days, it was the real thing. All those Wonka bars, they were real. They were, okay, prop Wonka bars. But it wasn't like these days, CGI, where you press a button and they all appear. They were all there. Everything was there. Oh. Lots of stuff.
This is one of the highlights of my life. I love this movie.
All right,
Pleasure
thank you
meeting you
very
both.
much.
Thank
Lovely
you so
meeting
much.
sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.